Good morning. One of the programs that this organization, your organization, supports is the Pavement Preservation Emulsion Task Force. And this came about almost a year ago when it used to be under the Federal Highway umbrella, and now Federal Highway, for whatever reason, I think it was mainly funding, had determined that they could no longer support the Pavement Preservation Emulsion Task Force, so it was picked up by this group, AASHTO TSP2. It has a very ambitious agenda, and let me show you some of the things that this group is all about. First thing is emulsions have been a mystery, and if you think about it, nearly the biggest majority of all of our treatments use asphalt emulsions. But there's been problems with asphalt emulsions, and I think all of you know that, and that is the fact that we need to develop a different standard. And the different standard that everybody has in mind is we need to move emulsions into the same way that we've done with binders. We have performance-graded binders, now we need surface performance-graded emulsions. That's a huge undertaking, but we are going to get through that. That's the first task. The second task is to develop the adoption of uniform standards. Do you realize that until just a few months ago, and Derek covered this very nicely, there was not one pavement preservation treatment that was approved by AASHTO and in the AASHTO spec book, and having gone through the subcommittee on materials. The Emulsion Task Force now is putting pavement preservation treatments into the AASHTO format, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We're also talking about we've got to do a better job getting into quality assurance and training, and as I talked yesterday, certification. We have 540 people that have entered into the certification realm, and we've got to make that grow. And finally, we have to develop some new test methods so they don't take quite as long to do these tests as currently being done. I mean, if you're a supplier, you want the test to be performed relatively quick and not hold up the entire job. So let's talk about the second task, the adopting of uniform standards. As Derek pointed out, this is a long process. It takes a minimum of a year and probably longer than that to really get something through by the time you respond to all of the issues that are created. So I think you could honestly say it's going to take about 2 years to get a specification into the AASHTO book. And so what is happening here is we're already got the design specifications and the material specifications moving through the subcommittee on materials. The construction guide specs, which those are the specs that you would relate to, they would have to go through the subcommittee on construction. However, there has been a problem with that because the subcommittee on construction hasn't dealt with this issue for almost 10 years. So I'll give you an idea where we want to go next with that. Also, there's a list of best practices. So there's really 4 steps. There's design, materials, construction guides, and then we have the best practices. And the best practices are normally published by Federal Highway, except Federal Highway is not putting anything up on their website, and so we're kind of stalled with both the construction guide specs and best practices. So we have to deal with that. As we get into the structure of the Emulsion Task Force, you're going to see there's a lot of different subcommittees under this task force. There's one on residue and recovery and testing. Residue recovery, we've got to do a better job, and this is what this group is working on, because distillation does not mimic what actually happens to an emulsion in the field. So there's new tests that are being looked at to be more representative of what an emulsion goes through in the field. Because when you distill an emulsion, you're going to ruin the properties of the polymers and other properties in the emulsion that it never really would experience. We have a subcommittee on design, which is on mixtures. That would be your micro-surfacing, your slurry, your polymer-modified slurry. Those are mixed processes. We also have a subcommittee group that's on sprays. That would be your chip seals, your fog seals, and so forth. So they deal with that. We have a subcommittee on research, and that's to not only comb through the research that's been done and try to apply it, but also to see where there are other research needs. We have a group that's in charge of recycling emulsions. That would be your full depth. Even though that's not preservation, it's still an emulsion process, full depth and cold in place. And finally, we are into the quality assurance and the education and certification portion of it. That's something we deal with. And finally, we have this special working group, and we'll get into that. Special working group is really dealing with this whole idea of surface performance graded emulsions. So who's on this? Well, these are the groups. There are 6 state agencies, 16 industries, 6 academics, and 2 from Federal Highway. From the industry, they're represented by the Asphalt Emulsion Manufacturers Association, or the Asphalt Institute, the Asphalt Recycling and Reclaiming Association, AASHTO Resource. That's the testing. That's formerly AMRL. The many asphalt suppliers and producers, the testing laboratories, and then the International Slurry Surfacing Association. If you look at that group, we have the 10 suppliers and producers. Very important, because you can't move forward without your partners. We need contractors. We have 3 contractors. We have 5 laboratories. If we're going to change the way we have to do testing, and we're asking for these laboratories to become certified under AASHTO Resource. And we have another academic, a polymer supplier, and then we have 3 surfactant suppliers. So altogether, it's a pretty robust group. We have the right people. We've also partnered, and this is one of my initiatives, we partnered with Jiangsu Transportation Institute in China. Now, why did we do that? Because if we're dealing with this round-robin testing and trying to advance this whole idea of surface performance-graded emulsions, it might not be a bad idea to have another country do their own series of testing and then compare the results afterwards. Because this is a big deal. If we change it in this country, it's going to be changed pretty much around the world. And China is a huge user of emulsion these days. They're growing. This is a private lab. It's on their stock exchange. It's one of the biggest labs. They have 30, well, it's a research institute. They have over 30 different divisions scattered around China. So we're going to have a lot of round-robin testing that will feed back into our information. So why do we want to develop a surface performance grade? Well, you all know that you've seen bleeding with the different emulsions, the emulsion binders. When it gets hot, they have a tendency to bleed. You see it in a wheel pass, you see it going up a hill, you've seen it at intersections. We've had problems sometimes with chip seals, with early retention. And so, we've got to better quantify what the time is when we sweep and so forth. We need these emulsions to perform a little different than what they are now. And then sometimes in the northern climates, we find that the emulsions are a little bit too brittle to withstand the lower temperatures. And so we maybe get a little long-term aggregate loss, maybe some aggregates being removed by snow plows. And so there's a lot of issues that have to be looked at. So we're taking these on one by one. One of the things that's already been done has gone through the subcommittee on materials, is they've upgraded these 3 emulsion standards. It's the M140, the M208, and the M316. Doesn't mean anything, but one is for anionic emulsions, one is for cationic emulsions, and the other is for polymer modified emulsions. And that may be something that every one of the agencies may want to get in there and look and see. This would help you classify your emulsions a little better than maybe what we are now. So, talk a little bit about what we want to do, but what have we done? Well, one of the things, and Derek touched on this, chip seal design and material specifications have been approved by the subcommittee on materials. Microsurfacing is approved, slurry is approved, fog seal is approved, cold in place recycling has been approved. Right now in the hopper we have tack coats, scrub seals, and sand seals. Those are in the hopper. Those have to go through this approval process that may take 2 years. And finally, we're looking at developing some reasonable standards that we can submit on the foamed asphalt stabilization, the bonded surface treatments. Those would be something similar to what we use in NovaChip. And then the cold mixes, where we actually pull it off the road and recycle it with an emulsion and lay it back down, both virgin and recycled. The other thing we've done is we've identified different training resources, and we're trying to move ahead with that. What are good training resources? We've also moved ahead with a certification. As I said, we have over 500 and some people that are interested, have been interested in getting certified, and we see that growing. And they're certified now in the slurries and the chips and the crack treatments. We're looking at quality assurance protocols for the emulsion treatments. That's something that has been missing in a lot of the preservation treatments. What should we test? How should we test it? And so we're looking at quality control plans. How do we set them up for the contractors? What should the contractors have in a quality control plan for the different treatments? And then the acceptance testing for the agencies. What tests should be done? How often should those tests be done? Independent assurance, how should the agency, and many agencies already have this, but we're trying to tie it in with preservation. And finally, looking at vendor supplied material certifications. So those are all issues that are facing us. And so what is the short-term plan? Well, the short-term plan is complete all of these specifications, get them into the hopper for the subcommittee on materials, develop these protocols for quality assurance. And we've got them pretty much developed, but we have to move them through. And this is for microsurfacing and chip seals. And then, we've got to continually update our research agenda to make sure that we're covering the research that's already been done. There's been some very good research that's coming to a conclusion that maybe we can adopt in some of the new protocols. The long-term plan is we're still trying to promote this whole idea of asphalt emulsion technologies through the partnerships. That's why I'm up here talking with you, to let you know what's going on and where to look in the new specs. We're interested in proposing some large research studies through NCPP. They've been moved forward. We just hope that they're adopted. They're a considerable amount of money. If you think about it, it costs an awful lot of money to move the PGs through. I mean, that was a multi-million-dollar effort, and we're trying to do this on a shoestring budget, but yet we're getting a lot of volunteer help. A lot of the companies, the industries that I talked about, they're putting themselves on the line. They're doing this round-robin testing at no cost. It's tremendous. And then we're trying to get this whole idea of this surface performance graded specification through. That's monumental. So if we can do that, it's going to be great. Now, one issue, and this is going to come up in the business meeting, and I'll tell you right now, in order to have all of this gratis research done, somebody is going to have to take all of the emulsion samples, split them, send them out to the different labs that have volunteered to do this new testing protocol, and then capture all of the data when it's returned and put it in a recognizable form that we can all use. We have a company that is willing to do this, but they're a private company and they can't give that much of their time, so we feel that this whole protocol would cost $14,000. And so what I'm asking is the partnership to consider a contribution of $3,500 for this effort. Now, we have not drawn anything out of your partnership in the past for the Emulsion Task Force, But I will be asking at the business meeting to consider a $3,500 donation from this partnership and $3,500 from all the other partnerships. That would cover the cost. We would move ahead. It's under your umbrella, and so we'd like to see this approved. So with that, we're making progress. Thank you.